Philippine prehistory and its peopling is a controversial topic within the disciplines of anthropology, archaeology, genetics, and linguistics up to this day. There is a variety of data that has been sifted through in coming up with several theories on how this archipelago, as well as its neighboring set of islands, has been colonized by the human species thousands of years ago. The first evidence of human settlement in what is now the Philippines was found in Tapon Cave in Palawan, way back 1970. A skull cap was excavated apart from animal remains and was dated to 16,500 years ago. However, a recent excavation in Calao Cave in Cagayan yielded the metatarsal or foot bone, which was dated to 26 years ago, making the possibility of human presence in Luzon earlier than previously thought. A theory proposed by Peter Bellwood, a professor of archaeology, is the Austronesian migration theory. It propounds on the expansion of a group of people called the Austronesians from Asia into the Pacific by means of Taiwan 6,000 years ago. The theory largely explains the similarities in culture, language, and physical attributes in the different countries in the most Asian countries, and even in Madagascar.
Some 5,000 years ago, the ancestors of today's Southeast Asians began a journey that would become one of the greatest series of human migrations of the world. They came from what is now southern China, traveled south toward Taiwan, and then entered the Philippines through its northernmost edge, Batanes. They populated the archipelago for more than 1,000 years, and then from here traveled west toward Madagascar in Africa and east toward Easter Island near South America. Linguists call them the Austronesian speaking peoples, speakers of a family of languages heard in the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and many other islands of Southeast Asia and the Pacific.
The first Austronesian-speaking Filipinos who arrived here about 4,000 years ago from Taiwan through the Batanes and northern Luzon almost certainly came here by boat. The Philippines represented the entry of these populations into the tropical part of the world. And when they arrived here, they also had to develop their methods of crossing sea, building canoes. Very likely that in the Philippines, the early Austronesians began to use outriggers and also sails for sailing their canoes over very large distances, because of course once you go through the Philippines into the western Pacific, the distances between the islands become larger and larger, and the technology has to improve, particularly for getting to places such as Polynesia, where islands can very often be many thousands of kilometers apart.
Textbooks used to say that the ancestors of today's Filipinos crossed land bridges to reach the Philippines. But evidence shows that they actually came by boat from southern China through Taiwan. Linguists say the sophisticated seafaring culture was instrumental in the spread of Austronesian languages during the Neolithic era. Austronesians colonized the islands of Southeast Asia and the Pacific and imposed the language on their subjects. Today, there are about 1,200 languages considered part of the Austronesian family, spoken by 350 million people. Boats and the sea played a central role in the beliefs of Austronesian-speaking people. A burial jar from the Neolithic era found in the Manunggul Cave in Palawan has for a cover the figure of a boatman transporting the dead to the afterlife. It shows how the sea dominated life and death. lingling o are circular ornaments common among various peoples in Southeast Asia, such as the Igorots of the Cordillera region. A type of lingling o that protrudes on three sides was found in Palawan and is similar to those found on Sarawak in Malaysia, as well as Vietnam and even Taiwan. The lingling o is concrete proof of the common culture of Austronesian-speaking peoples that flourished in Southeast Asia some 5,000 years ago. Austronesian languages were believed to be the most widespread family of languages during the 1500s, when Ferdinand Magellan came to the Philippines. Today, hundreds of millions across the vast part of the globe speak a variation of an Austronesian language. Historians and archaeologists say that the Philippines played an important role in the spread of Austronesian languages. It also showed that culture and commerce prospered between the Philippines and its neighbors at least 5 millennia ago.
I think the most important thing for Filipinos to understand is that they are part of a shared cultural heritage, which is not just the Philippines, but the peoples of Indonesia, of central Vietnam, Madagascar, which is off the east coast of Africa, the native peoples of Taiwan to the north, and virtually all of the Pacific Islands. This heritage is very important because it means that many of the peoples of Southeast Asia share a common cultural and linguistic ancestry, and I hope that that knowledge will enable them all to understand each other much better in the years to come.
Wilhelm Solheim's hypothesis was an alternative theory that focused on the maritime nature of the peopling of the Philippines in Southeast Asia, rather than following a primacy of linguistics and agricultural methods. According to him, the homeland of these Austronesian-speaking people lay not in Taiwan or southern China, but rather in the area of Celebes Sea, Island, Southeast Asia, or ICEA.
Hi, this is Stephen Martin with Study Abroad Journal, and we are here in Manila, Philippines with Wilhelm Solheim, and we're asking him a few questions about Austronesian culture. Mr. Solheim, if we may ask you, who are the Austronesians and where did they come from?
The Austronesians suggesting they're a people is an error right away. It's only a linguistics term to a very major superfamily of languages. It should not refer to people. And that's why I invented the term Nusan Tao, was to refer to the people and not to the language. And I say that their homeland was on boats throughout the South China Sea, parts of the eastern Indian Ocean, out into the Bismarcks, the end of New Guinea, while the other major hypothesis is that they originated in South China, moved from there as pre-Austronesian to Taiwan, and in Taiwan the language evolved into a whole series of 7, 8, 9 quite distinct languages. And according to Peter Bellwood, who is the secondary author of the main hypothesis, they moved from, one of these groups moved from there somehow to the Philippines, to Luzon, south through the Philippines, and spread east and west from Mindanao. I disagree with that. As I say, I say their homeland was on the boats, because they, many of them, until quite recently, you had families living on the boats, and the women in particular, some of them, never set foot on land. They were scared to death of going on land because they were sure if they set foot on land, the evil spirits on the land would get them right away. So they spent their whole life on the boat or in the water. The men weren't so worried about the spirits, and the children paid no attention to them.
For most Filipinos, the historical foundation for the peopling of the Philippines has been Otley Bayer's waves of migration hypothesis. Don Man, a caveman type who was similar to Java man, Peking man, and other Asian Homo sapiens of 250,000 years ago. Next, the Aboriginal Pidgin group, the Negritos, who arrived between 25,000 and 30,000 years ago via land bridges.
It is theorized the first inhabitants to arrive in the Philippine area were the Negrito, who may represent an early split-off from the first Africans who migrated along the southern coastal route. They brought with them basic forms of animism, where everything is animated by a spirit.
The seafaring tool using Indonesian group, who arrived about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, and were the first immigrants to reach the Philippines by sea. Lastly, the seafaring, more civilized Malays, who brought the iron cage culture and were the real colonizers and dominant cultural group in the pre-Hispanic Philippines. This hypothesis has fallen out of favor in the academe due to its focus on diffusion and anachronistic categories. It was his students, such as the late Landa Hocano, that disapproved the waves of migration. Anthropologist Landa Hocano of the University of the Philippines contends that what fossil evidence of ancient men show is that they do not only migrated to the Philippines, but also to New Guinea, Borneo, and Australia. He says that there is no way of determining if they were Negritos at all. However, what is sure is that there is evidence that the Philippines was inhabited as early as 21,000 or 22,000 years ago. The discovery may show that men came earlier to the Philippines than to the Malay Peninsula. If this is true, the first inhabitants of the Philippines did not come from the Malay Peninsula. Hocano further believes that the present Filipinos are products of the long process of evolution and movement of people. Up until now, there is no certainty of how the Philippines was peopled, but what is widely accepted is we came from Negritos.